Hi guys, welcome back to my series on how we can be successful in the education spaces on our educational journey as a mum, a wife, and everything in between. My next set of tips are to do with engaging presentations. Now, on your education journey, you may be asked to do just a format of a presentation, so a PowerPoint or an actual presented presentation. So for my endpoint assessment for my degree, I had to do a verbal presentation as part of my endpoint assessment. So I'm going to give you 5 tips on how we can create engaging presentation. Tip number 1, know your audience. You have to tailor your presentation to the needs of the audience. So that can be an endpoint assessor who is looking for specific criteria for you to cover while you're doing your presentation. So say you did, mine was on a project. So I had a 6-month project that I did, and then I had to present how I managed that project, not the project itself, but how I managed the project over the life cycle of the project. So in my presentation, I knew what specific elements that endpoint assessor was looking for. More specifically, they wanted to know how I managed the project, what I've learned from the course that helped me to manage the project, an action plan when I go further. So you have to know your audience when you are creating your presentation. What this will do, it will not only give you somewhere to start, but it will also keep them engaged because they know that you're talking to them. They know that you've presented it for this purpose, and for that reason, it will keep them engaged. Point number 2, you have to plan your content. Now, it's much easier to plan content when you know what the learning outcomes are. So for example, for my course, I knew that there were certain learning outcomes for written assignments. It was very clear what those learning outcomes were, and then you may have had a rubric to go against. Whereas for my endpoint assessment, it was very much your endpoint assessment is going to be on your project. There was not really any clear direction as to what exactly did they want me to talk about. So after having discussions with my tutor and then speaking to other people who had done the endpoint assessment before, I knew more specifically they wanted me to talk about my experience of managing a project. So I was able to plan the content that I wanted to present around that. And then there were other elements that I needed to add in. So because it was a leadership and management degree, I had to make sure that I included things like my leadership style. So I spoke a bit about transformational leadership, but also understanding what the difference is between transformational and situational leadership. So I was able to plan that content in because I knew it was a leadership and management degree. But also I knew it was based on a project. So even though I was specifically talking about my management of the project, I had to understand what the management or the project cycle was. So I could plan my content to include elements of project management, leadership and management, and personal development. And that's how I presented that project. So you have to make sure that you are planning the content. Just like you'd plan a written assignment, you have to do the same when you're doing a presentation. Point number 3, use visuals wisely. Now, I love a presentation that is bright, colourful, pictures, not too much words. However, you have to, along with knowing your audience and planning your content, understand what visuals are going to be necessary for that presentation. So for example, if you are proposing something through a presentation, you may want to put in there some facts and figures. So you may want to present graphs, you may want to present matrices that are visuals for the audience to understand what you are talking about. Or you may be speaking about something else like personal development. So you may want to put visuals in there that might include reflective models and what they look like. Or you might want to put a visual of your SWOT analysis and make sure it looks nice and appealing to your audience in order to reduce the amount of words that are on a slide. And that kind of links into my next point, which is keep it simple. When presentations have lots of words on them, your audience are more likely to read the words over listening to the message. So when you are planning your visuals, you want to make sure that the visuals that you are using can help get across the message that you are sharing while still being appealing and also being informative, because inevitably your course lecturer or your tutor is going to be looking at that presentation to see how well you've met the learning outcomes or the knowledge, skills and behaviours of the course that you are doing. So keep it simple and make the visuals aesthetically pleasing, whilst making sure that you can get as much information across to your audience as possible. When I did my presentation, I presented it to the endpoint assessor, but I've also done a presentation was literally just a slide, and then in my notes is where some of the information was held. So you can put more information on slides if you are not necessarily going to be presenting it to someone and they're going to be reading through it, and you can add additional information into the notes. But if you know you're going to be presenting it, you can put less information, more prompts for yourself, so that the audience is listening to you whilst the presentation is visually appealing and also informative to your audience. And my final point is practice delivery. As much as you may think the amount of slides, 5 slides, is great for a 15-minute presentation, if you are like me and you are a waffler, you are going to have to practice, practice, practice. This will stop you from your verbal tics and cues like ums and ahs and long silences and pauses, but it will also help you stick to your time limit and not go under time as well. One really good function that is available on Microsoft PowerPoint is the ability to actually practice with PowerPoint. It's called present with me, I think it is, and it's a button that you can just go through the slides with the computer, and it will listen to you while you talk through your presentation. It will tell you to do things like pick up the pace, it will tell you to speak louder, it will tell you where where you do have verbal tics and things like that. So it will say, oh, you say too much, or things like that. So you can practice with your computer, but it is also really useful to practice with someone maybe at home. So maybe your children are older, so they can give you cues on, mummy, you said that too much, or you can use your partner, so they can also give you more constructive feedback. So make sure you are practicing your presentation. So know your audience, plan your content, use visuals wisely, keep it simple, and practice delivery. I hope those tips have helped. Let me know in the comments if you have used any of those tips and how successful they have been for you. And I will be back in the next video.